Hey everyone, Xiaomi is famous for their budget devices. Their Mi A phones in particular are well known for being solid mid-rangers with stock Android. However, despite how popular the Mi A1 was, they did receive quite a bit of criticism for the Mi A2, namely because they removed some very key features like the headphone jack. Now, with this third generation, is Xiaomi going to prove that they're back on track? I'm Angie for GSM Arena, and this is our review of the Xiaomi Mi A3. At first glance, the Mi A3 easily seems like a step up from last year. The material seems more premium than its price, and the phone has a nice, elegant look thanks to the glass back. We should mention that specs-wise and build-wise, it's identical to the Mi 9cc, although that phone comes with MIUI, is at a lower price, and it's found in fewer markets. Otherwise, Xiaomi is clearly sticking to an overall design language this year. The Mi A3 looks extremely similar to the Xiaomi Mi 9T. Like the 9T, the phone is a fingerprint magnet, and it's more fragile than a device with a metal or a plastic back. There's also no water protection, but there are few phones at this price with a high IP rating. When you pick it up, it's comfortable in the hand thanks to the curved edges, and all the buttons are where you'd expect them to be. There's also some things that you might not have expected there too. There's an IR blaster, a headphone jack, and an SD card slot. The Mi A3 comes with a minimum of 64 GB, which should be enough for most people, but it's nice to know that you won't worry about running out of space. On the front, there's a water droplet notch that's easy to ignore, and an optical under-display fingerprint reader. It's accurate and you won't have to turn on the screen in order for it to work, but a regular reader would have been much faster. You can also use the face unlock option, but it's less secure. That's as much as I can say without addressing the elephant in the room. The Xiaomi Mi A3 has a Super AMOLED display that's around 6 inches in diagonal. Its max brightness is mediocre, and sunlight legibility is a bit difficult, like on the Mi A2 from last year. However, what we really have to talk about is that 720p resolution. With a pixel density of less than 300 ppi, it's one of the least pixel-dense screens we've seen this year. On the one hand, there are some benefits that come from this. First, it makes the phone cheaper, which is probably the main reason why Xiaomi decided to go with this resolution. Second, there's less screen for the battery to power, and third, there's also less screen for the chipset to power, which means the Mi A3 feels snappy. Unsurprisingly, the 4030 mAh battery combined with the low-resolution display and power-efficient chipset mean excellent battery life. The Mi A3 scored 101 hours on our battery life tests, which is a substantial jump up from the Mi A2 from last year. The Mi A3 also supports Quick Charge 3.0 for when you finally run out of juice, but keep in mind that the charger in the box is a standard 10-watt one. The chipset actually is a bit downclocked in comparison to the one from last year, and it's supposed to deliver pretty much the same performance for 20% less energy. However, since there's so much less screen to power, it feels blazing fast. Games are a breeze, and if you really need to game on a budget, this is actually a viable option. So there are some real benefits to the 720p display, but naturally the cost of this choice means that images simply don't look as good. When you're watching videos or playing games, it's not that noticeable, but things like smaller text might be a bit of an eyesore. You can see pixelation in the edges of some icons, and for me, it seems like the phone is blurry or has an oil smudge on the screen. Take this with a grain of salt because I'm also used to resolutions of around 500 ppi. You personally might not be bothered by this, so I seriously urge you to check the phone out in person to determine if it's truly a deal breaker or not. Now, as far as audio goes, things are good, but not great. The single downward-firing speaker has excellent loudness and good clarity. There's not a lot of bass, and at max volume, some highs get into tinny territory, but as a whole, it's a good speaker. When using wired headphones, things are alright, but you can get higher quality sound if you use hi-fi Bluetooth headphones, since the Mi A3 supports the aptX codec. However, the benefit of wired headphones is the FM radio, which is one of the only non-stock Android apps you'll find in the phone. The only other apps that aren't Google's are the Mi Store, Mi Community, and the Camera app. This is because the Mi A3 is part of the Android One program and it sports a squeaky clean version of Android Pie. There are no ads and no unnecessary inclusions. I know this is the gold standard for a lot of people, but I wish Xiaomi would have included the navigation gestures from MIUI, because they're substantially better than the native pill navigation you'll find on the Mi A3. Earlier, I also mentioned an IR blaster. Well, the UI is so pared down that it doesn't include an app for it. It's an easy fix, and all you have to do is download the Mi Remote app. Once it's on there, it works just like you'd expect, but it is strange that it isn't pre-installed on the phone. Although it technically has 3 cameras on the back, the Mi A3 really has 2 active snappers and a 2-megapixel depth sensor. The main 48-megapixel main camera has an f1.79 lens and spits out 12-megapixel images, while the 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera has an f2.2 lens. Neither has optical image stabilization. The default 12-megapixel images you get in good light have excellent levels of detail and nice colors. There's wide dynamic range, great contrast, and generally, these are some of the best 12-megapixel daylight photos we've seen. There's no point in shooting in 48 megapixels because while you get a higher resolution, the detail is nothing special and it takes up a lot more space. Daytime snaps with the ultra-wide camera aren't quite as good as the main cameras, but the colors are still nice and there isn't much noise. However, you might see some corner softness due to the distortion correction. In low light, the lack of OIS forces shutter speeds of 1/14, which requires a higher ISO. This leads to more noise and more noise processing, so you end up losing detail. As a result, I'd say if the light is low, just use night mode. It makes a huge difference because images are properly exposed, nicely balanced, and a lot more detail is preserved. It's not the best night mode around, but it's a bit faster than Huawei's. As far as the ultra-wide camera goes, well, images at night aren't good. They have aggressive noise reduction, dark exposure, and they're generally soft and lack detail. 4K videos with the main camera are very detailed and almost flagship-worthy. They have low noise, accurate colors, and very good contrast, and an average dynamic range. 1080p at 30 FPS footage comes out pretty much the same, but naturally with the lower resolution. However, we would advise against shooting in 60 FPS because footage comes out quite pixelated. There's no 4K videos with the ultra-wide camera, but there are 1080p ones. Full HD ultra-wide videos aren't quite as detailed, and they have warmer colors, good contrast, and about the same dynamic range as videos from the main camera. The 32-megapixel front camera has nice colors and a wide dynamic range. The camera is a fixed focus one, but if you get the distance right and keep your hand still, images will come out looking quite detailed. So I think that Xiaomi missed the mark a little bit with this phone. If they'd gone with a 1080p display, there wouldn't have been much of a hit to performance or battery life, and people would have straight up bought this phone because it would have everything that you want from a mid-ranger. As it is right now, that display is a deal breaker for some, and honestly, I think you have to check it out in person to determine if it's a deal breaker for you. If it's not, this phone offers a lot. It has a good camera, it has good performance, it has good battery, and it has stock Android, which is awesome. However, if it is a deal breaker for you, then I'd actually go with the Galaxy A50 or the Xiaomi Mi 9 SE. Well, that's about it for the Xiaomi Mi A3. Tell me what you think and if it is a deal breaker for you, and down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button down below, subscribe, everything, and I'll see you next time.